In the vast landscape of 20th century history, few names evoke as much power, fear, and controversy as Joseph Stalin. Born Ioseb Vissarionis Zayugashvili in the Georgian town of Gori on December 18, 1878, he would rise from obscurity to become the iron-fisted ruler of the Soviet Union, shaping the fate of millions and leaving a legacy that continues to divide historians and citizens alike. His path to power was forged in revolution, bathed in blood, and maintained through a relentless grip on every aspect of Soviet life. But to understand Stalin is not merely to study a dictator. It is to explore the psychological transformation of a man shaped by poverty, betrayal, ideology, and an unquenchable thirst for control. Young Ioseb grew up in a humble household. His father was an alcoholic shoemaker, often abusive, and his mother a devoutly religious laundress who dreamed of her son becoming a priest. That dream nearly came true. Stalin entered a seminary in Tiflis, where he studied to become a priest in the Georgian Orthodox Church. But it was there that he discovered the writings of Karl Marx and the fires of revolutionary thought. He abandoned religion for radical politics, joining underground socialist circles, and eventually becoming a key member of the Bolsheviks, the faction led by Vladimir Lenin. During these early years, Stalin was not a charismatic speaker like Trotsky, nor a renowned intellectual like Lenin. He was a man of action, organizing strikes, robberies, and revolutionary propaganda. His ability to survive arrests, exile, and hardship marked him as a reliable operative. By the time of the Russian Revolution in 1917, Stalin was positioned close enough to Lenin to be appointed Commissar of Nationalities, giving him access to vast administrative power. But it wasn't until Lenin's death in 1924 that Stalin began his calculated ascent to supreme authority. Unlike his rivals, Stalin understood that power in the Soviet Union lay not in speeches, but in bureaucracy. He used his position as General Secretary of the Communist Party to appoint loyalists, remove dissenters, and outmaneuver his opponents. Most notably, Leon Trotsky, who was eventually exiled and later assassinated in Mexico. By the late 1920s, Stalin stood unchallenged at the top of the Soviet hierarchy. Stalin's rule was characterized by brutal efficiency and a belief that any means were justified to achieve the communist vision. He launched the first five-year plan in 1928, aimed at rapid industrialization and the collectivization of agriculture. The results were catastrophic and transformative. Millions of peasants were forced off their land. Grain was seized by the state. Resistance was met with violence. Famine swept across Ukraine, known as the Holodomor, killing millions. Stalin never apologized. Simultaneously, the machinery of terror began to grind. The NKVD, Stalin's secret police, became a force of paranoia and repression. During the Great Purge of the 1930s, Stalin eliminated anyone he perceived as a threat. Former allies, military generals, party members, intellectuals, even ordinary citizens who were accused of counter-revolutionary activity. Show trials and forced confessions became standard. It is estimated that over 1 million people were executed, and many more were sent to the gulags. Soviet labor camps scattered across the frozen tundra, where survival was a daily struggle. Yet despite the terror, Stalin transformed the USSR into a global superpower. He centralized the economy, constructed massive industrial complexes, and built a state where the party controlled every aspect of life: the press, the schools, even the arts. History was rewritten to glorify Stalin's role. Cities were renamed, statues erected, and portraits hung in every public building. The cult of personality turned him into a godlike figure, and millions feared and worshipped him in equal measure. When Nazi Germany invaded the Soviet Union in 1941, Stalin was caught off guard, despite repeated warnings. The first months were disastrous. Entire Soviet divisions were encircled and destroyed. But Stalin, ever the survivor, rallied the nation. He appealed to Russian patriotism, organized the defense of Moscow, and moved entire factories eastward beyond the reach of German bombs. Under his leadership, the Red Army would eventually push back the Nazi war machine, culminating in the brutal Battle of Stalingrad, a turning point not just in the war, but in Stalin's legacy. After victory in 1945, Stalin emerged as one of the most powerful men on earth. He sat at the table with Roosevelt and Churchill, helping shape the post-war order. But the peace was uneasy. The Iron Curtain descended over Eastern Europe, and the Cold War began. Stalin imposed communist regimes across the region, crushing dissent and igniting a global ideological struggle with the United States. The world was divided, and Stalin stood at the head of one half of it. Domestically, Stalin's paranoia deepened. He launched another wave of purges in the late 1940s, targeting Jewish intellectuals, doctors, and even members of his own inner circle. His health began to fail, and whispers of a possible new round of terror loomed over the Soviet Union. But in March 1953, Joseph Stalin suffered a stroke and died a few days later. His death was met with a mix of public grief and quiet relief. The man who ruled through fear was gone, and the Soviet Union would begin a slow, painful process of reckoning with his legacy. Today, Stalin remains one of the most debated figures in history. In Russia, some still view him as a symbol of strength and national pride, citing his role in defeating Hitler and industrializing the nation. Others remember him as a tyrant whose policies caused the deaths of millions and whose regime created a culture of fear and lies. The truth, as always, lies somewhere in between. Stalin was not a monster from mythology, but a man, flawed, brilliant, ruthless, who shaped the modern world in ways that continue to echo through time. His story is a warning of what happens when absolute power meets ideology and when fear becomes the foundation of rule.